Hello everybody, today is the 30th of December. We have one saint, and he is the same saint across all three sources. And it is Saint Egwin of Evesham, also known as Egwin, and Egwin. And he is from the 8th century. Almost nothing is known about the life of Saint Egwin, who is generally counted as the third bishop of Worcester, in brackets C.693 to 717, and founder of Evesham Abbey, brackets 700 to 710, in present-day Evesham, Worcestershire, England. Though he is not mentioned by either St. Bede the Venerable, who we commemorate back on the 25th of May, nor in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, St. Egwin's name is recorded in the witness list of 7 charters issued between 692 and 717, and named as beneficiary of Evesham's behalf of 3 others. Though none of the extant versions of these charters is authentic, and several are unquestionably obvious forgeries, some seem to have a basis in fact, and may be considered on the whole to be reliable. I assume that's maybe considered, but anyway, depending on how much faith one places on the various charters, excluding the patently fraudulent ones, St. Egwin actively promoted Evesham's interests, cultivating royal and lay patronage. He developed a significant endowment, which includes estates of Abbots Morton, Droitwich, and Umbersley in Worcestershire, as well as Aldebarrow and Stratford-upon-Avon in Warwickshire. St. Egwin is also among the saints petitioned in 4 Anglo-Saxon era litanies, according to the early 12th century Benedictine monk and chronicler John of Worcester, brackets C.1140, next to one of those crosses that indicates that's probably when he died, whose sources are unknown and of a dubious veracity. St. Egwin succeeded Oftfor as the 3rd bishop of Worcester in 692, though the date of Ofter's repose is uncertain. It is quite possible that Ofter flourished until 699. John further avers that St. Egwin began construction on the monastery that became Evesham Abbey soon after his elevation to bishop, and reposed 30th of December 717. The final episcopal act of St. Egwin, the date of which can be certain, was his participation at the First Council of Cloveshow, bracket Clotheshow, in July 716. I will now bring over the Celtic Saints website entry so that you can read it, and then I'll finish off thingy. Close to 3 centuries after St. Egwin's repose, Benedictine monk and scholar Byrhtferth of Ramsey composed Vita Sancti Egwini, the first life of Saint Egwin to have been written. Inasmuch as there was paucity of information on Saint Egwin beyond the previously mentioned charters, the Vita is little more than the work of a hagiographic fiction. Doubtful accuracy notwithstanding, his Vita was the foundation of all future hagiography. Notable works include Vita S. Egwini by monk and hagiographer Dominic of Evesham, dated c. 1100. The Digby Gopher recension, an early 12th anonymous revision of Dominic's Vita. Finally, about a century later, historian and abbot of Evesham, Thomas of Marlborough, who has the died cross next to 1236 in brackets, reworks book 1 of Dominic's Vita, and then repeats book 2 practically verbatim in his Historia Abbatiae de Evesham. Whilst these works do not shed any new light on the historical Saint Egwin, they do allow us to deduce the extent of his cult, particularly in and around Evesham. In his Vita Sancti Egwin, Egwini, the previous monk, who begins with B, tells us that as bishop, St. Egwin endeavoured to get his flock to embrace Christian morality, especially regarding marriage and clerical celibacy. St. Egwin seems to have taken a rather stern approach in his preaching. The monk who begins with B has St. Egwin reciting St. Bede the Venerable's De Die Iodisi, bracket on the Day of Judgment, in one of his sermons. This understandably led to conflict with his flock, who, as is all too often the case, attacked St. Egwin and eventually drove him from his see. In response, St. Egwin went to Rome and put his case before Pope Constantine, bracket 708 to 715, for adjudication. As he prepared to depart for Rome, St. Egwin shackled himself as an act of penance, throwing the key in the river Avon. Upon arriving in Rome, one of his companions to the... What? Upon arrival in Rome, one of his companions to caught a fish in the Tiber. At this point of the story, the monk who begins with B, adapting a folk tale which dates back to Herodotus, tells us the key to St. Egwin's shackles was miraculously found inside the fish. Freed from his shackles, St. Egwin put his case to Pope Constantine, who exonerated St. Egwin. Vindicated, St. Egwin immediately returned to England, and upon his arrival founded Evesham Abbey, as he was instructed in a vision on the return journey from Rome. Shortly afterwards, the monk that begins with B says St. Egwin returned to Rome with King St. Offa of the East Saxons, who he commemorated back on the 15th, and Coenred of the Mercians, seeking papal privilege for the abbey. St. Bede the Venerable does record an account of this journey, though without any mention of St. Egwin. The monk who begins with B goes on to list some of the estates in Evesham's endowments, information that he seems to have obtained from the aforementioned, probably fictitious, charters, and closes with a recitation of several of St. Egwin's 10th century miracles, which include the blind having their sight restored, the deaf their hearing, and the healing of those sick in body and soul. St. Egwin is generally considered to have reposed on the 30th of December, 717, though the French Benedictine monk and scholar Jean Mabillon, who died in 1707 according to the cross and numbers in the brackets that follows his name, claimed it was 720, and was buried at Evesham Abbey. St. Egwin's relics were translated to a shrine in the abbey in 1183, which unfortunately was destroyed along with the abbey church during the dissolution of the monasteries. Many English mythologies list as his feast as 11th of January, which was most likely the date of the translation of his relics. However, the 11th century on St. Egwin's repose is listed in liturgical calendars, especially those of Evesham and Worcester, on the 30th of December. That was the long entry, and that was only for the book. Now we will read the entry in the group chat. St. Egwin of Evesham, Bishop of Worcester, bracket 717 AD. Consecrated to God in his youth, he eventually became the third Bishop of Worcester in England in 692 and may have founded the monastery of Evesham. Here is the thingy. I hope you did read it. So, by the power of Google, and I kind of thought, hey, if he has a long entry in the book, he probably has Troparion somewhere, and my hunch was rewarded. This pilgrim thingy has a Kontakion and a Troparion, so the Troparion is sung in tone 4. Of the house of the kings of Mercia, you consecrated all of your youth to the Lord, and having become a bishop, you did not hesitate to reproach the great ones of this world for their defects. Founder of the holy monastery of Evesham, St. Egwin beseeched the Lord to save us. He then has a Kontakion in tone 2, which apparently is from Orthodox England. Right. Wait, never mind. Yeah, this has nothing to do with St. Egwin. Never mind. I mean, I'll leave the Troparion at the very least in the description for you both, but Oh, okay. Never mind. Okay, I mean, can I include this? I mean, it's technically related, but I mean, no, I won't include it. Thank you all for watching. I've been, Rita Lazar. I do appreciate the support on the, thank you video that was uploaded yesterday. I've been Rita Lazar. God bless you all, and amen.